I started learning Braille in kindergarten. So when kids started learning their letters, I started learning my letters too. Although because Braille has sort of different levels of code, I did have to incorporate that, which is something that a print reader doesn't have to do. But it was all part of my regular education, and I had it at the same time as my peers. Braille is a code. It's often mistaken for a language. It is not a language. It is a code that represents a language. Braille is essentially 6 dots that creates anything from music to math to chemistry. All of these have specific codes, but they're all based on those same 6 dots. In terms of people being able to read Braille versus print and the speed in terms of is it just as fast or slower, I think the average Braille reader, to be fair, is slower, but this is not because they can't be fast. I have heard stories of people that read Braille at 200, 300, 400 words a minute, but I think because we grow up in a sighted world primarily, there's a lot of misconception that Braille is slower and arduous and dead, for example. Like, especially with technology now, there's this misconception that you can learn everything with technology and that there's no real place for Braille. And I think that that promotes this theory that Braille is less efficient than speech. I use a phone like anybody else. It has a screen reader on it, and the thing that is shocking to people is it's the exact same phone as anyone else would use. So it's often seen as impressive that a blind person can navigate on a touch screen, which for all intents and purposes is completely blank from a blindness perspective, but is actually being made accessible via the screen reader. And I'm going to be obviously demonstrating some of the Braille devices that I use, but I guess in addition to that, I read in hard copy Braille, so I prefer to read actual books. Most aren't available in hard copy Braille, and really they take up a lot of space, so it's not practical to have them. But I can also load books onto a small device that I have called a PackMate, which is basically like a laptop without a physical screen. A screen reader is a speech output application. So it's a software application that's installed on your computer, and it provides speech output for those who are unable to see or those who may have print disabilities. Basically, anybody who is unable to see standard print on a typical computer screen will use a screen reader. A screen reader does things well if a website is built with the code in mind and with accessibility in mind, and it will perform as it needs to in that way. Same with an application. If it's built, structured well, screen reader will perform optimally. Where it won't do so well is in things like reading images. A screen reader cannot natively read images. And if there's no structure in an application or in a website, a screen reader will suffer in performance in that sense. So I'm gonna let my screen reader read through a bit of a website, and this is gonna be at a speed that is quick, I guess, relatively speaking. So this is actually information that I can understand. This is what I would use if I was navigating at home, going on Facebook, social media, answering emails, that kind of thing. This is not my work speed, but this is a typical speed that I would use, just leisure navigation, I guess I would say. And I'll do that again now with my work speed, and you'll notice that it changes.
Go link navigation, link content, keyboard accessibility, present access, link graphic 4370, welcome, link Patricia, visit link HSDC now. Visit link HSDC now, visit link global links, visit link my links, list of one items, people, content, link search list end, visit link point zero, list of 5 items, link HSDC now, staff website, link global businesses, link global functions, link regions, link cloud tools, list end, link point zero, list of 4 items, heading level 3, link digital currency, link our group CEOs view, heading level 3, link go win interview, link watch him on Bloomberg TV, heading level 3, link mental health marathon, link sign up today, let's ask your questions, heading level 3, link update from Linda Seymour, link what are your focus for, list end, list of one items, heading level 2, new forms of digital money, for goes gold, win shares and news on hsdc.com. So that would be the second speed. There is actually what I would use if I'm reading content deeply and need to process it. So what most people would probably appreciate would be more like this. Canada homepage, go to link navigation, link content, keyboard accessibility tab to navigate forward, shift plus tab key to navigate back, enter to access link, and escape to reset, press enter to access tab.
So those sort of demonstrate the 3 levels of navigation, and this latter level is painful for me. A Braille display is a hardware device. It can be connected to your computer either via USB or these days oftentimes via Bluetooth. And it allows a blind person to see what is spoken on screen in Braille, which for those who are more visual learners or those who want a tactile representation of what things are, a Braille display will allow for that and allows for that information to be perceived in what a blind person would consider a more visual form. So in front of me, I have my Braille display, and this allows me to see information that is presented and spoken in Braille as well. It's essentially the equivalent of the monitor that's visually in front of me that I cannot see. So I'm in my email application, and I will open up an email. Sent to all Canada compliance staff. Please feel free to share with GSC Partners 4. Now, that's all I see on this line. There's probably more that's actually displayed on the line visually, but I wanted to kind of show you what I actually see in terms of what I'm seeing on screen versus what is actually being displayed on screen. So you just saw me talk about what I use the Braille display for and how it works in terms of what I'm seeing. But I think the thing that stands out to most people from what I've heard is they're very curious about what the actual buttons and things on this particular display do. And every display looks different. But for this particular model, the part up top here is the actual display. This is the Braille display monitor equivalent. And below it is what is called a Braille keyboard. So the whole unit is called the display, but the actual keyboard portion is for what they call Braille entry. So I can technically use this to Braille in. I can either Braille in or I can type in. But for editing purposes, it's easier because my hands are here, and then I can, if there's a mistake or something, I can just add in a letter down below. So if I were to type this, I would say, and I wrote this as a test, and it's now showing on the display, but I can also, which says the exact same thing. I've now brailled in, this is a test. I typically use the same devices that everyone else uses. I just use Braille in my screen reader, and maybe voice memos to record something if I need it, but typically same stuff anybody else uses.